few animals elicit as emotional a response of fear and revulsion as snakes. But do they deserve our hate? Do they deserve our fear? Maybe if we learn a little bit about them, they'd seem less scary. That's our goal today. Today we're going to get to know the snakes of Florida, the garden snakes, the forest snakes, the water snakes, the common and the rare. This is Coast to Canopy, an ecology podcast from WFSU Public Media. I'm Rob Diaz de Villegas. Joining me in the studio today is Kim Sash. Kim is a biological monitoring coordinator at Tall Timbers Research Station and Land Conservancy. Thanks for being here, Kim.
Thanks for having me.
We also have Pierson Hill, a research associate with FWC's Fish and Wildlife Research Institute. And Pierson is Kim's husband.
Good morning, Rob. Happy to be here.
Morning, Pierson. And lastly, we have WFSU Public Media's own Regan McCarthy. Hi, Regan.
Hey, Rob. I'm excited to learn about these snakes.
Yeah, me too. We have, and that's the other thing too, we also have other guests. We have snake guests that are here with us. And so before we bring them out, I want to remind everybody, so any of you listening to this as an audio podcast, if you want to see these snakes, you can find the video version of Coast to Canopy at wfsu.org/ecology blog or on the WFSU Ecology YouTube channel. All right, so let's get started. So before we bring out our first snake guest, let's talk about what's your guys' jobs? You guys herpetologists, and what's a herpetologist? What's that job entail?
Well, I would consider myself a herpetologist, and all that means is that I study reptiles and amphibians in a professional capacity. And you can do that in any number of ways. You can study their genetics, you can study their conservation, you can study their ecology, you can study them in a zoo setting. What I do for my job is I generate research and science to provide information to conservation partners, both in private sector and the government sector, on how to conserve and regulate reptiles and amphibians.
Gotcha. And Kim, so you do herpetology, but that's not your whole job.
Yeah, and I got my master's studying snakes, so I love snakes. But I also work on, I do work on gopher tortoises and amphibians, but then I also have GPS collars on coyotes. I've worked on feral hogs, so I do kind of a whole range. So I'm kind of, more of a wildlife biologist than what I think of as a herpetologist. I mean, Pierson, you can ask Pierson, what is the scientific name of this species in Africa, and he can tell you for all the herps of the world. I am not that kind of herpetologist.
Gotcha.
Pierson, you were talking about where that name comes from, herpetologist, because I think when I think of snake, I don't think of a name that sounds like a herp to me. So where's that come from?
Right. Just traditionally, reptiles and amphibians have all just been lumped together in the same field of study because they tend to exist in the same place at the same time. They're kind of in this just general creepy crawly group, even though they're not taxonomically or evolutionarily related. So people who study snakes tend to also study salamanders and other creepy crawlies. So that's why they
ectotherms get kind of lumped.
Ectotherms.
Yes.
Ectotherms.
So yes. Does everybody know what an ectotherm is?
Cold-blooded animals.
Yes.
Cold-blooded animals.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So part of the job too is kind of handling the animals. I remember years ago, I shot a video with Tall Timbers did a bio blitz at the Clockney River. You guys were both there.
Yep.
And where Pierson got in the water with a snorkel and came back with Florida softshell turtle. I remember you said something like, what they lack in a hard shell, they make up for with claws and jaws. So talk about that. I mean, part of your job is to handle animals that can harm you. And talk about, do you trained for that? Is that how do you get that experience?
Yeah, certainly as a herpetologist, we interact with big scary turtles like you're talking about, softshell turtles, and I also trap alligator snapping turtles for my job, which get over 100 pounds and have a pretty impressive bite. And so there's a lot of on-the-job training and acquired experience that goes into that. When it comes to handling venomous snakes, since the consequences of an envenomation is medically serious, there's a much more formal training that goes with that and formal procedures. We use special equipment that keeps us, our body and our hands at a distance from the snake at all times. And so we take that a lot more seriously.
Gotcha. So one last question before we start bringing out our little friends. Talk I want to talk about snakes in Florida. So every once in a while, I see these kind of biodiversity maps of North America. Trees, reptiles, and I see a lot of times that concentrated spot of biodiversity tends to be not just Florida, but really like our area, like right around here. How diverse are snakes in Florida, and what are some of our different kind of overview of snakes in Florida?
Sure. We have 46 species of snakes in Florida. Only 6 of those are venomous species. And so the vast majority of species in Florida are non-venomous, but you can find them in almost every habitat Florida has to offer. We have snakes that live underground, we have snakes that live in the water, and we have snakes that live in the trees.
Gotcha.
And I just want to add, because you're bringing up biodiversity and because I'm more of a wildlife biologist, I think it's really important that people do understand that we live in a biodiversity hotspot. This area is a biodiversity hotspot. Just like people always think the tropical rainforest is got all these species, but actually, the region of the Southeast is a biodiversity hotspot. And there's 2 ways that is designated. And one is that you have to have over 1,500 species of vascular plants. And so those are plants that they're endemic. They live here and they don't live anywhere else. And the other way, there's 2 criteria. The vascular plants, one of them, 1,500 species. And the other one is that you have to have over, I think it's 70% habitat loss. So you get designated as a biodiversity hotspot because you don't have very much habitat for all of these species that actually occur there. And, the Apalachicola National Forest is one of those areas that really pings that map because of all of the vascular plants and then a lot of amphibians and a lot of reptiles, including a lot of species of snake.
Do we have any endemic snakes in Florida?
We have several. We have something called the short-tailed kingsnake that only lives in the sand ridges of central Florida. They look like a living shoelace, only get about 2 feet long. And as far as we know, they only eat another little species of snake that lives in the sand and a few other skinks. And we have a few endemic forms of water snake as well. We have a South Florida mole kingsnake that only lives in the dry prairies, in the Kissimmee prairies. Florida has a high degree of endemism of snakes.
Gotcha.
And there's some Keys species, I think, right, that are kind of...
We don't have any endemic key species, but we have some races or subspecies of snakes that can also be found on the mainland, but when you get to the Florida Keys, they look a little bit different, so we give them a different taxonomic category.
Right.
Keys ringneck snake is one.
Yeah. They're genetically isolated on islands, of course. Yeah,
that's right.
They would start diversifying or changing. So you mentioned the mole king snake.
Mm-hmm. We have 2 species of mole king snake in Florida. Extremely secretive. I've only caught 3 in my entire career as a herpetologist here in the Florida Panhandle. Yeah. And they're a neat one. Always makes my month when I come across one.
So let's bring out our first snake guest. You have an eastern king snake, is that correct?
We do.
So we usually don't keep them in zippered bags, but he pooped in his other bag, so this is where we are now.
Look at that.
Oh my gosh, so beautiful.
So this is an eastern king snake, which is one of the more widespread and common races of the larger species called the common king snake. So depending on where you go in North America, you see various color forms of the common king snake. In the eastern U.S., we get the eastern king snake, which are typically black or kind of chocolate brown with yellow or white bands. So in Florida, you find snakes that look like this, basically in the Florida Panhandle and extreme northern Florida. And they change appearance as you go southward through the peninsula. You get something called the Florida king snake, which has a much busier yellow and black pattern. And by the time you get to the Everglades, you get something called the Brooks king snake, which is kind of a pale yellow tan with almost no pattern.
So those are subspecies of the eastern king snake?
Yep,
Gotcha.
correct.
So for folks who are listening here, I think to me this snake looks a little more chocolatey brown, I think, instead of the black king snake that I'm picturing from illustrations and books. This guy's a nice chocolatey brown with some beautiful white stripes. And I really like looking at his underbelly area. His scales are shiny and beautiful there. What a pretty snake.
King snakes have smooth scales, which give them that shiny appearance, as opposed to something with keeled scales, like a water snake or a rattlesnake. Each individual scale has a ridge that runs down the middle, and so it causes them not to be as shiny and reflective.
Yeah.
And
So how is this different from the king snake that you were just telling us about that's endemic to our area? The I forget
Mole
what.
king snake.
Yeah, the mole king snake. What would I notice that would differentiate them?
Right. The eastern king snake is much bigger than the mole king snake as an adult. Mole king snakes max out about 2 feet. The mole king snakes in our area are kind of reddish with darker red or brown spots, very similar to a corn snake if you're familiar with those. They have different body proportions. So it's one of those things as a herpetologist, you look at enough of them over time and it's instantly apparent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their habitat, I suppose, too, is a giveaway.
They do tend to segregate a little bit by habitat. Eastern king snakes are what we call a generalist, that you can kind of find them in most every habitat that we have. Since they eat such a wide variety of other animals, they also eat a lot of turtle eggs, and so you tend to find them around the edges of lakes where turtles spend a lot of time nesting. But of course, their claim to fame is their ability to be able to eat venomous snakes. They'll eat any snake that they can wolf down, but they have some immunity to the venom of our venomous snake species and can easily eat a cottonmouth or a rattlesnake.
I was wondering about that when you were talking about we were noticing the scales and how smooth and shiny they were. And I'm thinking like indigo snakes have a similar sort of.
Iridescence.
Yeah. And they also eat venomous snakes. Is there any connection to that, or is that just like a wild coincidence? Or
I think in that case, it's probably a coincidence.
Yeah. They eat other snakes. So talk about why you wanted to bring this one out first.
Yes. Well, this is one of my outreach snakes at Tall Timbers. And he's actually captive born. But his favorite thing to do is eat. So he's always hungry. We feed him mice. But if we were to, hold a few of our other snakes that we brought in today and then hold this guy, he would just probably try to eat my hand just because of the smell, right? So you can see he's tongue flicking. And so he's smelling. He's always looking for a meal. And so it wouldn't be like, it wouldn't be like a strike, like a bite. It would be like open your mouth kind of eat you kind of thing.
In the tongue flicking, my understanding from a person who doesn't know a lot about snakes is that smelling, right? He's trying so he's smelling you, smelling the area now to see if maybe there's some snacks there around.
I don't know if you have any mice in your studio, but he would find them if they existed.
So yes, snakes use their tongue to taste their environment, essentially. So what they're doing is picking up scent particles in the air, and they pull them back into their mouth, and they put that forked tongue up in the roof of their mouth into an organ called the Jacobson's organ. So it'd be basically like you licking the back of your nose in order to be able to smell.
Oh, wow.
Fascinating. Wow.
So where would we find an eastern king snake sort of in our area? What kind of habitats? You said around lake edges.
Yeah, since they eat a lot of the things that occur near wetlands, especially turtle eggs and other snakes, water snakes, they tend to be most abundant around lakes, riverways, and actually these days they're most abundant around the edges of salt marshes along the coast where they take advantage of abundant rodent populations. We're actually witnessing a disappearance in eastern king snakes throughout the southeast, especially in northern Florida. We are tracking citizen observations as part of my job, and so FWC maintains a rare snake reporting website that citizens, if they see an eastern king snake in their yard or while they're out in a park or national forest, they can upload the observation there, and it helps us kind of track their populations over time and know where they're doing well versus where they're disappearing. And we're not sure why they've disappeared. Like I said, they're a generalist snake. Generalist snakes tend to be able to tolerate human disturbances to the landscape. So something as robust as an eastern king snake disappearing from our landscape is alarming.
Right. Do you also look at like iNaturalist observations if people use that?
iNaturalist is a great way to report observations of these rare snakes as well.
And this is one of those species. So like I said, I did my master's on snakes, and I did that at Tall Timbers. So I caught over 2,600 individual snakes. I put pit tags in them, like you microchip your dog so I could recognize individuals. So if I recaptured them, I could keep a count. And king snakes, Bruce Means, who's I know you've talked to, he's a famous herpetologist. And so Bruce was actually a research director at Tall Timbers in the 80s. And just opportunistically, Bruce out on the landscape of Tall Timbers caught about 28 eastern king snakes. And so I did this intensive trapping study, and just on Tall Timbers alone, I caught over I think 1,800 snakes. I had several sites, but about 1,800 snakes on tall timbers, 19 different species. And never once did I catch an eastern king snake. And so Bruce and I actually wrote, you can look it up. We wrote a paper on this and just, very, very general, but definitely a decline of these species. And yeah, definitely don't know why. But some people think maybe fire ants are playing a role. They get in, if king snake lays its eggs, fire ants, as babies are hatching, will go into the eggs and kill them. They do that with snakes, turtles, ground nesting birds, all of those things. So maybe that plays a role. But yeah, it's really weird to not have eastern king snakes out in the landscape. And they were one of those species that, way back when there was tenant farmers living on tall timbers, everybody liked an eastern king snake because they do eat venomous snakes. So it was a snake that you did want around your house. This isn't a snake that people were just killing. So, we don't think it's a human caused, but it's really strange that they're not around as much anymore.
One question that I need to ask, because as a journalist, they always say, when you go out to do an interview, like if somebody has a dog, you got to ask the name of the dog. So I need to get the details here. The people want to know, does our king snake have a name?
Yes, he does. His name is Ray.
Ray,
which is, I think somebody else named him, but I think that's how you say king in Spanish.
Rey?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
this is a very old snake, and the chocolate coloration that you mentioned earlier is one of the things you see in older king snakes. They tend to transition from a black and yellow more to a brown and cream as they get on in life.
his head is much darker, but he definitely gets browner.
Right, I do see that. He's got in the first few inches there a much darker color and then much lighter toward the tail. How long do you think that snake is? He looks pretty long to me.
He's 4.5 feet.
Yeah,
I love that you can just like untangle him.
Oh, yeah. Look at that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I would
belly.
say longer than a yard, right? Does that beat a yardstick for sure?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say so.
Very
Wow.
cool.
He looks deceptively small because my arms are so long.
You've got a great wingspan.
You can hold them out this way.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hey, Ray.
This is average size for an adult eastern king snake.
And I think he's probably, I don't know, I think I've had him for at least 10 years now.
And you got him as an adult, and they only live 15 years in captivity. So he's an old man.
Yeah. But in good average.
But yeah, he's educated hundreds, if not thousands, of young people about our local snakes.
Gotcha. So do you when you interface with the public and you start bringing out snakes, do you get a lot of people who are just really revulsed and just like, and do you ever feel like you've changed any? Has anyone ever said like, oh, touching a snake today? And I know one story for sure because I got it on tape, but just where someone held a snake and they're like, I'm not as afraid as I used to be of snakes.
All the time, and that's one of the most rewarding parts of doing public outreach and manning an educational table is that you get to change hearts and minds surrounding snakes. And the most interesting part is that it's always the adults or the parents, of children that are the most afraid. So the adults are glued to the back wall, while the children are up front showing no fear. And but a lot of parents can't have their kids showing them up and being braver. So the adults will work their way forward and eventually get to hold one of these outreach snakes.
Yeah, no. It was last time I went on River Trek, Apalachicola River Trek, 2021. There was one of the paddlers had a lifelong fear of snakes, and he held snakes that you brought to Stefanolgo, and we had dinner on the second night. And that was a beautiful thing to catch on tape too. So speaking of snakes that we might encounter more regularly, let's meet a gray rat snake.
I love how snakes travel. They just,
Pillowcases.
yeah.
A lot of pillowcases.
Throw them in a sack and they're good to go.
It's really actually very easy. It's kind of nice.
And it's breathable, right? Because I know when we did I went to an indigo snake release, and they were in the pillowcases. You can see the scales from the outside, which is really cool. And then you could tell, they're healthy and happy in there. Obviously, they wouldn't want to stay in there. Oh, wow.
It's a very good way to have them travel.
That's not as gray as I would have thought it would have been.
This is our favorite. Pierson, especially that favorite color color phase, those really, really light gray rat snakes. So you can see because they have blotches, right? So we just saw the kingsnake. He had like rings, and this guy has blotches. So these are kind of like identifying characteristics of the snake. So you see the blotches going all down his back, and typically they are much darker. And this guy, do you call him like the white oak phase?
Yeah, people who keep gray rat snakes, will designate these pale ones as white oak phase gray rat snakes.
Gotcha.
But locally here in the Florida Panhandle, people call all gray rat snakes oak snakes, just as a colloquialism.
Do they tend to live in oak trees? Is there a connection there?
They do. They like live oak trees a lot. They are arboreal, which means they spend a lot of time up in tree limbs. It's because they eat a lot of bird eggs and hatchling birds. They raid nests. And so great climbers. They can climb straight up the side of a tree.
I know we could put him up in the window there. He'd probably climb right up it. This is one. So when I did my master's, I put radio trackers in gray rat snakes and corn snakes. And it's amazing, these guys, their familiarity with their home range. So we would track them. And actually, that's how Pierson and I met. He was my intern. I don't recommend dating your employees, but we did date for, we dated for 13 years. We dated for 13 years. So we made sure it was real. Yeah. But anyway, so they would go to the same oak tree again and again and again, and, about a 7-acre home range. So, but they knew, crawling around their belly to get back to that same spot time after time. And a lot of times they'll climb up those oak trees, both to forage, eating a baby gray squirrel, or to go up there to shed, right? So they're so susceptible when they're shedding because their eyes, they kind of go blind almost, because their eyes turn. So they'll sit around while they're doing that. And so they'll go back to those trees or whatever and shed and hang out there. And just the ability to go back to that's what we call site fidelity, is just they're going back to the same site again and again and again. And so when you cut down a tree or you remove that tree, especially there's a lot of development happening in tall timber or in Tallahassee right now, and you see like all these trees being cut down. And so that's probably really disrupting some of these snakes' home ranges. And then a lot of times that's when you see them, you make a change in your yard and all of a sudden things start popping up. And it's just because you've kind of disrupted where they're going to naturally go. And what's interesting is that my friend Jen House, who works at the Jones Center up at Itchaway, she also had radio telemetry in these, so little radios, that make a beep, so we follow them. And the Jones Center is much more of the pristine, like longleaf wiregrass ecosystem,
right,
whereas Tall Timbers is much more old field, so we have a lot more hardwoods. And what we saw was that her guys, because she had less oak trees, they have a much larger home range because they're traveling a lot further to get to some of those hardwood trees than they would be at Tall Timbers. So,
right.
Yeah.
So I'm noticing, I want to talk about, just for our listeners, for people who can't see this snake, I want to talk a little bit about what this one looks like. So you were talking about how light it is. So it's kind of I would say like almost like a very ivory color with these, slightly darker sort of geometric blotches instead of the stripes like the kingsnake had. So beautiful. But again, I'm drawn to its underbelly area, and I think I'm seeing this shape of the scale on this snake's underbelly compared to the one we were just looking at looks like a completely different shape to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, does that have to do, like these ones are much flatter and maybe more like long and rectangular compared to the other ones that maybe were more diamond shaped on the kingsnake that we were just looking at. And I'm wondering, does that have to do with where the snake lives, the fact that it climbs? Is that what I'm noticing here?
That is very perceptive. So the enlarged scales on the underside of snakes we call ventral scales. And in rat snakes, they are especially hard-edged, and those form kind of little hooks that they use to climb straight up the sides of trees. And so if you watch them climb vertically up a tree trunk, you can see each little belly scale hooking in to every little irregularity in the surface that they're climbing on. Huh. And so people often find them climbing up the sides of their houses, if there's brick or stucco. That's how fine of a surface that they can actually cling to despite having no legs or claws.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
wow.
really
That's so
amazing.
interesting. I've honestly always been curious about that. How in the world do snakes climb? Because, yeah, they're not, it's not like wrapping all the way around the tree. Like, what's it grabbing onto? And so that's so fascinating that its scales have that ability to hook in like that.
That's one of my favorite things to do for people is like grab a snake and literally like Velcro it to the tree almost. I mean,
Yeah.
it just grabs hold and they just go straight up and people are just amazed because they're just very adept at climbing. And versus the king snake, spends a lot more time on the ground and a little bit more fossorial, right? Lives a little bit more underground than these guys are very arboreal. I mean, terrestrial, but also very arboreal.
Yeah.
So
and again, as a person who doesn't know a lot about snakes, if you showed me that snake, I might say, yeah, that looks sort of like a rattlesnake to me. I think it's got some similar design, and I think that might be a mistake that people make a lot in their
People think
in their
everything is a
yards.
rattlesnake. So
Can you tell me a little bit about what's different about this? Like what visually looks different from a rattlesnake?
Sure, as an experienced herpetologist, I would say everything. But if you're going to put them side by side and you've never seen either of them before, the first thing you're going to notice is that a eastern diamondback rattlesnake is much stockier or chubbier for its length. And so rat snakes are much longer and skinnier. They also kind of have a different color palette overall. Gray rat snakes tend to be kind of brown on brown or brown on gray. Eastern diamondbacks have a lot more richer golds and orangey tones mixed in. And then the actual blotching pattern on the rat snake is kind of a rectangle or almost even H-shaped, whereas on a diamondback rattlesnake, each blotch actually is the shape of like a diamond gemstone, where they get their name.
Right. So we're likely to see this I actually saw one in my backyard just a couple months ago. So,
a diamondback or a gray rat?
no, a gray rat snake. I would have gotten so many photos on Facebook. You would have seen that I saw a
would have
diamondback
noticed.
rattlesnake. But so when it's in our yard, what is it eating in our little home ecosystem?
Yeah, gray rat snakes are one of the best backyard snakes, and they're one of the most familiar. They are able to tolerate suburbia, and when they are living and coexisting in our yards, they're eating squirrels, they're raiding birds' nests. The young ones eat lizards and frogs, and they're also, they do a great service of pest control. So, a lot of people have problems with rodents invading their, outsheds and chewing on wires and that kind of thing. So if you let rat snakes, coexist, they'll help you with your rodent problem.
So we have a chicken coop, and a lot of people find gray rat snakes eating eggs in their chicken coop. And what do you call our chicken coop? It's not a chicken
The
coop.
rat snake feeder.
The rat snake. So, you can give up an egg in exchange for pest control, I think. But yeah, and super harmless. I mean, these snakes are very docile, not usually very aggressive. Usually you could just pick them up and move them. And yeah, just one of my favorites.
So let's talk about backyard snakes since we're on this one, a very common backyard snake. So what other kind of snakes are we likely to see in our backyards? And how do we handle that?
Yeah, so in this area, the most common backyard snakes are going to be non-venomous. So the rat snakes, obviously. Corn snakes, which is a close relative. It basically looks like this, but in a orange and brown.
I had a corn snake in my backyard. He was very friendly. We coexisted well.
They're great.
Yes. And we didn't bring one of those in, but the belly scales on those are phenomenal. Like just black and white
checkerboard.
Yeah,
I should have paid more attention to his belly.
Yeah. I mean, their top is beautiful, but their bottom is. Yeah.
We have something called a southern black racer, which get about 3 or 4 feet long, skinny, shiny black. People often think they're indigo snakes, but they're much smaller and more tolerant.
White chin is a big characteristic of those.
And big eyes. You see them out during the day. They're often periscoping out of people's hedges and in flower beds.
The most common snake. So the most common snake that I trap, half of my captures usually black racers, very ubiquitous to habitat type. Like they'll be in, fields, uplands, backyards. They'll go in wetland areas. They really don't care. They'll go wherever they want.
The water snakes tend to be in people's backyards a lot. If people live on a lake or a pond, you're probably going to see banded water snakes are the most common in that scenario. If you're on a flowing waterway, you're going to see more brown water snakes, which eat a lot of catfish. And then there's this whole guild of small litter-dwelling flower bed type snakes. So ringneck snakes are common. People that garden a lot or landscape a lot. We have 2 species of earth snake, which are little brown, nondescript species.
Yeah.
Garter snakes.
Garter snakes, which have stripes.
Yeah, those are a common one to find in your yard. Big frog eaters, pretty snakes.
And then the most common venomous snake people are going to see in their yard in Florida are cottonmouths or water moccasins. And they tolerate human land uses fairly well and can persist around retention ponds or canals.
Is that the same name for one snake, a cottonmouth or a water moccasin? That's the same name?
Right. Water moccasin is kind of a colloquialism, just like oak snake is for the gray rat snake. So herpetologists call them cottonmouths. And then if you're talking to folks at the boat ramp, they may refer to them as a water moccasin.
Gotcha. So I know a lot of people I talk to, even people who tolerate snakes, they say if they see a cottonmouth in their backyard, that's the one snake they're going to take care of. How likely is a cottonmouth to bite you?
So cottonmouths have this reputation for being dangerous and they'll chase you and are very aggressive. All of that is nonsense. They put on a pretty impressive bluff display, although they're short, fat, slow snakes, and so they're not very good at crawling away. And so to make up for that, they stand their ground, they'll shake their tail, and then they gape and open their mouth and flap their head back, and they have this bright white interior lining of their mouth. And it's just a threat display is, I'm here, don't step on me, don't mess with me, let's go on our mutual ways. And but to actually get a cottonmouth to strike or bite, you really have to harass or physically engage with the snake. And so there have been behavioral studies done where people have approached cottonmouths in the wild. These are herpetologists doing these studies, and they'll stand next to the snake within striking distance and count how many of them actually strike, and then step on the snake, see how many of them strike, and then actually have a fake hand that grabs and strikes them. And it takes all the way to actually grabbing with the hand before you even have, almost 20% of them actually biting.
I catch a lot of cottonmouths in our snake traps, and we actually bring them into the office in a bucket because they're venomous, so they don't get transported in a pillowcase. But and then we tube them, so you put them in an acrylic tube in order to process them, work them up. But they rarely even strike at us, and we're really manipulating them. And yeah, I've never had. I've hundreds and hundreds of cottonmouths, and I'm not telling people that they should go pick up cottonmouths. I am not saying that. Don't do that. Don't test your luck. And I think the younger ones can be a little bit more aggressive. But yeah, they're really not aggressive though. It's.
So as a person who has a very friendly, fluffy golden retriever that lives at my house, he's friendly. He doesn't want to eat this snake, but he also doesn't know boundaries.
Yes.
He doesn't know this snake needs personal space. So having a venomous snake in my yard would be concerning for me because I don't want to risk having my dog get bitten by a venomous snake that could be deadly for my dog. Mm-hmm. So what can people do in a case like that? I watch these Instagram videos, where in California, like there's a dude you call and he comes to your house and you say, oh yeah, the snake's under the tarp, and he's got the hook and he hooks him and he puts it in a bucket and he takes it away and rehomes it somewhere. Are there people like that in our area that I can call to remove my venomous snake in a humane and safe way?
So I think St. Francis for a while had that service. I don't know.
There's a snake relocation network, and there's private individuals that will perform the service. There's wildlife relocators and rehabbers that'll perform the service. Pest control sometimes, depending if they have an experienced individual, will perform the service. As a herpetologist, though, moving a snake is extremely disruptive to it. As Kim was talking about earlier, that snakes are very attuned to the landscape in which they grew up in. They know every little hole, they know every nook and cranny, where to feed, where to drink water, where to find mates. And so when they're picked up and moved, it's like, taking you and dropping you in a whole nother city without a job, and they have to start over. And so they're extremely vulnerable in those first weeks and months to getting run over by a car or grabbed by a predator while they're trying to reorient. And so I try to suggest that people live alongside snakes to the extent possible. And so, for instance, if you have kids or dogs in your yard, you can teach your kids as soon as they're able to learn what venomous snakes are. I mean, I knew what a rattlesnake was by the time I was 5 or 6 years old, thanks to my dad. You can do what's called snake aversion training with your dogs, and
Our dogs are scared of pillowcases.
and garden hoses. And it's because we share our homestead with cottonmouths are the most common venomous snake in our yard, if not the most common snake.
Yeah.
We also have eastern diamondback rattlesnakes, and we love sharing our property with them. And so we train our dogs to be afraid of snakes. And it depends on what your dog's personality is, what training technique will work best with them, and people can research that online. But
I would say, too, I mean, your yard is habitat. And so there's a way to make it not be snake habitat. Like if you have a bunch of trash laying around or, a piece of tin on the ground or a big log pile, you're creating snake habitat. So you can also not create that. So by keeping things kind of picked up, a little bit more tidy, you can decrease the likelihood that one of those snakes is going to be in your yard because they don't like to be exposed. Like we said, they're ectotherms, so they need shady places to hang out, places to shed. So if you're creating those spaces in your yard, you're gonna run into a lot more snakes. And if a lot of people, I say, if you see a snake in your yard, just like I talked about having this high sight fidelity, that means they have memory, right? So they can remember when they had a pleasant experience somewhere, and they can also remember when they had an unpleasant experience somewhere. So even spraying a snake with a garden hose is going to be you can stay far away from them, you can spray them. That's not going to be a pleasant experience for them. And so there's been studies that show that if they have an unpleasant experience somewhere, they will avoid that place. So you can also train the snake.
So you can encourage the snake to find a new home on its
Yes.
own without
Yes.
plopping it up and putting it in another city,
Exactly.
as
basically
you say.
just delete that part of your
Its
yard
home
from
range.
its home range.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
like a gray ratsnake has a 7-acre home range. So that's a pretty big area. So if in your area, you have more of a wooded site, chances are that's where it's spending 90% of its time. And it's on a foraging bout when it comes into your yard. And then, it'll probably go back to wherever it was safe. But I do understand, as someone that has had their dog bit by a venomous snake, I can understand why people feel that way, and especially with young children. But, in most cases, especially with cottonmouths, a very survivable bite.
Yeah.
But medically significant.
Yes, definitely.
Right.
And not saying you want that to happen, but
And snakes don't chase people, right? I mean, if you're going to spray with a hose, it's not
if
going to
you
come
can't
after you.
outrun a cottonmouth, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Most people can get away.
And, people are just prone to misinterpret their behaviors as well. People get, overly excited, and it's something about a 3-foot-long tube of scales that makes people's brains short circuit, and everything gets bigger and faster, and its intentions are, are
We're scared of
second
things
guessed.
with not enough
So-
legs and scared of things with too many legs.
But no North American snake is going to chase after a person with the intention of biting. I mean, in most circumstances, there's occasional stories where snakes behaving
I
strangely.
can't wait to
but
see the comments.
I'm not
on
going to
this,
say
basically.
never. Yeah,
comments, I'm
everybody
sure.
has a cottonmouth chasing them story.
Yeah, everyone.
Except for me, and I've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of cottonmouths, and never once.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the opposite, in fact. So, yeah.
And sometimes I feel like when they're crawling towards you, people feel like, but oftentimes that's its quickest. You might be standing between it and its known safe place, and so oftentimes I think it's just trying to be like, let me just leave, let me get out of this situation. I'm going to wherever. It's not crawling towards you to attack you. It's crawling towards you because it's like that's where I know to go.
So that often
That's
happens.
what I was going to say is I think it's the unpredictability of the snake, right? Like if, or any, I don't know, any creepy crawly thing that has surprised me in my backyard and suddenly we have to negotiate how we can keep our separate spaces from each other. Just, I don't know what its plan is and it doesn't know what my plan is and we're both a little afraid of each other. And, it's moving around at a fast pace. And I think that's what makes it scary sometimes.
So that's one of the great things about just being able to, learn about something you're afraid of is all those, the knowledge starts to replace the fear.
Yeah.
All right. I think.
And this snake's name?
Oh, this one, I don't believe he has a human name.
What do you want it to?
You can name it.
Wow. What an
Oh
honor.
my goodness!
Yeah.
Should we ask our listeners?
Oh, we could.
drop.
Right in the comments.
Yeah.
What should we name this gray rat snake?
Yeah, drop a comment and let us know what this beautiful snake's name should be.
It's a boy snake.
Okay, good to know. Good to know when we
As if
think
that
of how to
matters.
name it.
When naming a snake. All right.
Yeah.
So let's meet another one of our snake guests. I'll let you choose the hognose or the pine snake.
So let's see if he will perform for us.
So this pine snake is a Florida pine snake, and we have a permit for this one. I
They're
think,
state threatened.
yeah, and he was actually hit on the road when he was Pierson and I found him. We were out road cruising for snakes, and we came across this guy, and he was maybe 3 feet long, maybe not even, and he was run over. He head was run over. So you can see one of his eye sockets is blown, and he was crawling upside down. We thought maybe he would die, but gosh, they're resilient, and he pulled through. And so now I've used him as an outreach snake ever since. And he was really weird for a while. He acts a little strange. His head was ran over by a car. But he's a good representative for his species. And because these pine snakes are so rare, it's fun to have him as an outreach animal.
So roads are kind of a threat to snakes, aren't they?
Huge threat. And becoming worse and worse every day as we're developing more and more, and traffic is increasing, especially in Florida. And so big day-active diurnal snakes like the Florida pine snake, the eastern indigo snake. We have a couple other big day-active snakes like the coach whip. Roads really take a heavy toll on them.
Diurnal, that means active during the day.
Active during the day as opposed to nocturnal, which is active during the night. And but pine snakes, they have this cool modified scale on the tip of their nose that they use for digging. They're really good at digging in sandy soils. They spend 80-90% of their time underground in rodent burrows. So if you're ever in the sandier parts of Florida and you look out in a cattle pasture and you see these white mounds of sand popping up everywhere, you may think they're ant mounds or something like that, but they're oftentimes the push-up mounds of something called the pocket gopher, which is a burrowing rodent. And almost like a mole, but more related to a rat. But pine snakes are specialists on eating pocket gophers underground. And so they can actually catch and swallow a pocket gopher in, an underground tunnel not much bigger than their bodies. So they're incredibly strong. They'll grab the pocket gopher and they'll just press their body up against the wall and smash the pocket gopher in between the snake's body and the wall of the burrow and not even be able to constrict.
Right.
They have that pointy tail that maybe helps with that. I don't know.
So just south of town, we have the Munson Sandhills. Is this an animal that would be there?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So you don't, when, snake trapping, really the only time I really see these is in April, and that's when they're, entering breeding season. So they're out on the surface looking for mates. But otherwise, pocket gophers, they can have 150-foot tunnels. Underground. So it's down in those tunnels moving around. And, one of the things that we talk about a lot with conservation is soil compaction as well. And so these guys, obviously, with everything that's fossorial, soil compaction really impacts them because it makes it a lot harder to dig holes or to get around in rodent burrows. So those areas that, constantly have traffic or your yard or places that are constantly driven over, that's where a lot of these species are disappearing from.
And another reason these are state threatened in Florida is because they prefer the higher, drier, sandier areas where people like to build their houses. And so much of their habitat has been developed or is being developed. They also need just open, grassy habitats, which are maintained by fire. And so prescribed fire is, increasingly difficult to implement as our landscapes become more and more divided. And so, yeah, there are a number of threats for the species, but they seem to do well as long as you keep things open and grassy and well burned.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's called a pine snake, I'm assuming, because that's where a lot of its habitat is in those pine forests that, like you're saying, need that prescribed burn to be a healthy habitat.
That's right. Yeah, this is a longleaf pine ecosystem specialist.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
But really a rare species. I mean, they should really have a lot more protections than they do. And there's a black pine snake over in Louisiana that's federally listed because of habitat loss. And this one probably should have the same amount of protections as that one
So
does.
protections would look like more land, more fire.
Yes, more land, more fire. Yeah, habitat protection for sure.
and in the case of the Louisiana pine snake, which has federal protections, they're breeding them in captivity and releasing them back out to restored habitats in the wild to try to bolster populations. Very similar to what's happening locally with the eastern indigo snake.
Right.
So as I'm looking at the snake, I am comparing it to the rat snake that we just saw, and definitely looks very different, much darker. It's I guess like design of its scales is less specific. You know, I think it has more of an overall color with some splotchy areas. But one thing that's really standing out to me is how, I guess, kind of like rough its scales look compared to the rat snake that we were just looking at. Each of its scales on the top of its body seems a lot more distinct and individual, and I don't know if that's because of its coloring or if that's really the case there.
They have a slightly keeled scale. And so right in the middle of their scale, there's just a little ridge. And the rat snake does not have that. We call that smooth scale versus this guy's a slightly keeled scale. So that makes the scales kind of look like they're popping a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And these
You can
guys
actually feel
often,
it if you
yeah.
want. If you run your finger across
You can-
especially
Yeah.
feels like rough like a pine cone.
So a lot of
It
our
does feel like
fossorial
a pine
snakes
cone,
and
yeah.
our aquatic snakes have the keeled scales.
So
But you'll notice
fossorial
this is-
meaning living underground or
Living
spending a lot of
underground.
time
Yep.
underground.
Yep.
And then water snakes, you said.
Yeah. And these guys, again, a lot of people think that these guys are a gray rat snake because they have the blotches like a gray rat snake does. But much different coloration, a very distinct head shape is one of the things that I think is really cool about pine snakes. And these guys will also, he does it sometimes, but if he gets irritated, he will blow air out of his mouth and he'll create this hissing sound and kind of spread his neck a little bit so he looks really intimidating. Pirate is his name, as he's only got one eye.
Pirate.
Hi.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Oh, what a great
Brian
name.
Weebler, our communications director, his kids named him Pirate.
Oh.
Yeah.
So they actually have a modified cartilage keel in the back of their throat. When they blow air across it, it creates one of the most loud hisses you could possibly imagine. It sounds like a tire deflating.
Oh, wow.
So, and it's hard to imagine an animal the size could create such a loud hissing sound
he
until
would
they
do
do it. And,
Well, he's
Oh,
happy.
there he's doing a little.
Oh, I heard a little.
Get it near the mic, maybe? Let's see.
Give him we got to
give-
kind of irritate him a little.
Just have a hissy fit.
Go underneath his chin a little. There, underneath. Yeah, tap him under. There you go.
So yeah, he has his moods.
I think he's too happy here. He's having a good
Yeah, he
day.
loves the studio.
And I think this is a good time to remind our listeners, if you want to see these snakes, you could watch this video on the WFSU Ecology blog, wfsu.org/ecology blog, or on the WFSU Ecology YouTube channel. So this is a snake that we're not likely to see, right? Most times of the year. But I know there's people who probably want to see snakes. And so we talked earlier about herpers. So talk about, as a hobby, if you're interested in snakes and watching them respectfully and photographing them, not handling them, talk about that as a hobby. Where and when do you want to go herping? Where are good places?
Well, a lot of people go to the Apalachicola National Forest. I mean, road cruising 20 years ago was a lot more exciting than it is now. I mean, we used to see a lot of snakes on the road, crossing the road. It's just not like that anymore. Like a lot of these species are really disappearing. Some of that is to do because of, the habitat's changing. There's less prescribed fire on the landscape. But you can also, walk around wetlands is always a good place to look for snakes. And the shoulder seasons are usually the best. It's hot right now, an ectotherm. Snakes are really laid up right now. We're not catching a lot. Things are really slow, but in the spring and fall are when you really see there's breeding going on during those times of year, and they're looking for mates, or they're looking to feed up before they're going to kind of hole up for the winter. So that's kind of when we usually go.
Yeah, and it kind of depends on what species you're hoping to see. Different species have different seasonal activity patterns. Like she mentioned earlier, that these are, very spring active, and you don't really see them the rest of the year. But, some species are strictly nocturnal. You're not going to see them unless you're out at night. And then a lot of the amphibians I study, if I'm looking for them, they're only breeding during the winter months. And so, when and where really depends on what you're hoping to see. But we're lucky, especially here in the Panhandle, that we have so many public conservation areas that people can go to. We have our state wildlife management areas, our state parks, our state forests. We have national forests. We have a national wildlife refuge. And so there's a lot of opportunities to get out there and see all different types of habitats and all the different types of species that live in them. Just be aware of the regulations of, what piece of property you're on. There's different regulations in terms of, what equipment you can have and how you can actually interact with the wildlife depending. So,
and we you don't need to, handling a snake is incredibly stressful for it. I mean, these guys are used to being handled, but a snake in the wild, that can be a really big stress. So, just trying to get a picture of it, doing what it's doing is the best way to go about it, especially if you're not sure of your snake ID, then you really should not be handling any snakes because there's a lot of snakes that look very similar to each other, and you don't want to make a bad mistake. We've got coral snakes and scarlet king snakes, very similar looking snakes, but you have to either you remember the rhyme, which is which I never remember. If red touch yellow, black. Kill a fellow. Yeah, but what's easiest for us is, the two warning lights and a stoplight are red and yellow. So if red and yellow are touching, then you have a coral snake. Otherwise, it's usually like a scarlet or scarlet king snake. But yeah, a lot of mimics. So need to be careful of that.
And always with photographing wildlife, a good zoom lens is, not everyone has a camera with a good zoom lens, but yeah, just as far as not scaring away the thing you want to photograph.
Mm-hmm. What I like about pine snakes is that so when you're, out herping, it's good to know, what habitat does the snake like and what does it eat? I mean, a lot of times that's going to guide where you're going to go to look for it. So if I go to a property and I don't see pocket gophers, the chances of them having pine snakes are pretty slim, and pocket gopher mounds really stand out. But I love a pocket gopher too. I mean, it's just fun to see their mounds, and they're called pocket gophers because they have fur-lined cheek pouches that they can store snacks in, roots or whatever it's going to eat for later. So they're just it's two really cool species that collide, and I love that.
And are these somewhat dependent on gopher tortoise burrows for nesting and?
They will definitely use gopher tortoise burrows, yes. So they will use them to burrow over wintering or even foraging, hanging out, cooling off. Yeah.
But they're not dependent on them. Okay. So they will live in areas without. So this species actually goes all the way up into New Jersey and all the way west into East Texas. And so
not as dependent as like an indigo snake is on gopher tortoise burrows, yeah.
But a lot of snakes use gopher tortoise burrows.
A lot of snakes use gopher tortoise burrows, yes. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I also work on gopher tortoises. So we put a camera down in the gopher tortoise burrow, and I've seen diamondbacks down in them, cottonmouths, I even saw like a garter snake down in them. So there's a bunch of species that'll go down in there and hang out, and it's got to be a cool place, especially this time of year. So and a good place to escape prescribed fire. So a lot of snakes are aware of that, and they get underground to avoid that.
Right. I feel like in a lot of videos I do, we bring it up and just these animals know what to do, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you don't see a lot of charred bodies out after a prescribed fire, right?
No, I mean, and we walk around tall timbers after we do a lot of prescribed fire at tall timbers, and very rarely do we see snakes that are dead. In the only times that you see a snake that was killed by prescribed fire, usually they're in a shed cycle, and so their senses are reduced because they can't see as well, they can't smell as well, and they just get a little confused on the landscape as to where to go sometimes. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, they have good sense of smell, so they smell smoke and they know where to go. Like I said, that familiar with their home range makes sense. If you're living with somewhere that has prescribed fire, you're going to know how to escape it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have adapted to living in a habitat with prescribed fire.
Right. Right. So you guys brought a second fossorial snake.
Oh yeah, sure did.
Nice to see you, pirate.
Pirate.
Yep, pirate.
Arr.
Oh, he would like to stay out.
Eager to be part of the show still.
We should do all our shows with some snakes. Yeah.
I know, right?
Have one wrapped around my arm. As I
Oh,
interview
this guy
people.
travels in Tupperware.
Yeah, he's
Little guy, so you can.
Oh, little buddy.
Oh, wow.
So this is, we have two native hognose snakes in Florida. We have the southern hognose snake and the eastern hognose snake. And this guy looks a little bit more like the southern hognose snake with the blotches, but he's actually a western hognose snake. And I bought him. He's captively bred. And they're just easier to keep in captivity as a western hognose snake, but otherwise very similar looking to the species we have here in Florida.
Gotcha.
And this is another snake that needs high, dry, sandy habitats, just like the southern pine snake. And so you find them in the same places at the same times quite frequently. So our native hognose snakes get a little bit bigger than this, but this is about a full-grown male. The females get about twice as
so
big.
this is not a baby. This is an adult snake.
Yeah, I think he's 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you can see on the camera, but he's just got the cutest little upturned nose right there. So these guys are actually big toad eaters. And so they use that. You know, if you've ever seen a toad, it'll kind of dig down into the dirt and kind of hang out. And so they use their little shovel-like nose to get those toads out. And then what's interesting about these guys is they're actually rear-fanged venomous. So, like normally you think about a venomous snake and they have the fangs in the front. These guys actually have a fang that goes to the back, and they can use that to actually, if you catch a toad, a lot of times they'll blow up with air and make themselves really big. So that fang can kind of pop those toads and make it a little bit easier to swallow. There's mild venomous, so it's kind of like if they were to bite you, which hognoses rarely bite. This is a species that a lot of people like to have as pets because very docile, not willing to bite. But if they did get you with that rear fang, it could be like a bee sting. Another rear-fanged venomous that we have is actually the garter snake. But that they kind of have to swing their head around because that fang kind of goes back this way. So they can get you with it, but they really got to chew on you a little bit more to get that fang in the right spot. So it's very rare that happens, and it's, a bee sting. It's not like a severe, you don't need to go to the doctor for something like that. But
yeah, there's kind of a wide spectrum of what we consider to be venomous in the snake world. And there's things that range from, completely non-venomous, don't even have the capacity to generate a toxin like the kingsnake or the gray ratsnake. They don't even have the organs. And then you have mildly venomous species like the garter snake, which actually has venom-producing glands, but they don't have much modified tooth apparatus to deliver that. And then the hognose snake is another step up where their teeth in the back of their mouth actually are grooved and allow for venom delivery. And then at the end of that, you have something like a diamondback rattlesnake, which has hypodermic needles for
Pierson can talk about snake dentition if we want to go that route. But it exists.
It's called an opistoglyph.
Yeah.
This is a selenoglyph or
Yeah.
pteroglyph.
Putting the audience to sleep. But there is actually snake dentitions, like different, different ways that their mouth is all put together, and that's all based on what they eat and if they have venom or not. So it is interesting, but probably not to our listeners.
In the case of these hognose snakes, their venom helps kind of mollify or sedate their prey as they're swallowing it to keep it from thrashing or scratching or injuring or biting.
It's crazy to me to think about this snake eating a toad because a toad seems bigger than this snake to me. I guess that's just, all snakes are eating really, I guess, pretty large prey in comparison to the size of their body.
That's right. Yep, snakes are well known for being able to, unhinge their jaws. Technically, that's not what they're doing. They just have extremely stretchy ligaments in between their jaw bones and a lot of hinges and that kind of thing. So, yeah, most snakes can swallow prey considerably larger than the diameter of their heads. And, there's wide variation in that within snakes too. Some snakes eat a lot of small meals, or eaten 2 or 3 times a week. And then there's snakes like the eastern diamondback rattlesnake. As an adult, they may eat 3 or 4 cottontail rabbits a year, and that's it.
Oh, wow.
So one meal will last them several months.
So when a diamondback eats a a rabbit, what does it do for a little while? I mean, it's probably pretty full, huh? I mean, it's probably just find a little hidey hole and just kind of.
That's exactly what it does. It finds the hidey hole and it hangs out and it digests. And so that's again, I think where prescribed fire really comes in for those species they're really adapted to prescribed fire is that when you're an ectotherm and you just ate a huge meal, you're relying on the environment to help you digest that meal. So they will go, oftentimes a diamondback going down into a gopher tortoise burrow, hang out during the night somewhere safe, and then during the day it can just crawl right outside of that gopher tortoise burrow, sit in the sun, digest that big meal, and then go back in. But, without getting sunlight to the forest floor, those snakes start disappearing because the sunlight is so important to them to help them with all of their function.
Yeah.
So that's just the function of having the canopy open and sunlight for them because they need that. Yeah, it's it's where I see them a lot too is on the edge of forest roads.
Oh yeah,
which is why if you're out there driving on a forest road, keep an eye out.
Yep. But a lot of times they're just digesting, thermoregulating as we call it.
Right.
Again, for our listeners, I just want to talk a little bit about what this snake looks like. So this is, what do you guys think? Is he a foot long? He's not very long, right?
A foot long is about right.
Yeah.
Oh,
and he's pretty slender, like a little bigger than a Tootsie Roll in diameter.
Yeah, they can be kind of fat-bodied.
Yeah.
They're slow-moving, like kind of fat-bodied snakes.
Yeah, and he's got a very, in my mind, a traditional-looking snake pattern. Oh, wow, but look at that cool underbelly. It's very shiny again and has a very cool, black and sort of orangey look to it. And I saw the end of his tail on the very end on the underside is all black back there. Is there a reason for that?
There's probably not an adaptive reason. A lot of snake coloration probably doesn't serve a lot of purpose, especially if they live underground most of the time. And so there's a lot of really gaudy colored snakes that we have around, like scarlet kingsnakes, and ostensibly their color pattern is to mimic a venomous snake and therefore avoid being eaten. But then we have a lot of brightly colored snakes that isn't quite clear why they are so pretty because it makes them stand out, at least to our eyes. But we don't know what they're, they may be avoiding things that see differently than we do.
Yeah.
And
Regan, do you want to hold this one?
Sure. Is there a special way to hold him?
Just support their body. You can use 2 hands, but
Hey, friend.
yeah.
So it is a kind of a general thing in snakes that live underground, especially in these sandy habitats that are dull up top, will have these brightly colored bellies, and that may be an adaptation to something digging them up accidentally and exposing them, and they can flash their belly, become flash colors. And so suddenly whatever is digging suddenly gets this, confusing array of colors and shapes, and they don't know what they're looking at. And it gives the snake just a few extra seconds to try and escape.
Yeah.
Okay,
We didn't even talk about
the top of
this.
his body is kind of is sand colored. We're thinking because he's going to blend in pretty well with the sand. Predators won't see him, but if they do see him, then he might do that flippity floppity thing.
Well, he plays dead and poops all over himself and will stick out his tongue and put on a huge display. So these guys are big, kind of fat-bodied, slow movers, and so they don't try to get away from you. They just try to be dead. And so, they poop all over themselves. And I mean, if you roll them,
themselves seem
to make
less
themselves
appetizing.
seem dead and less
like
appetizing.
he's like,
yes.
ooh, I have poop all over me.
Yeah.
You don't want to eat
and
me.
they'll open their mouth and stick their tongue out. They're very dramatic. And one reason why everybody loves a hognose snake. Even they're very active on October. People that know hognose snakes, they call it Hogtober because that's a good time to find them. The herpers say that. But these guys, when they're in captivity, they lose that rolling over and playing dead thing. But it is a really cool characteristic of a wild hognose that they do that. And they also will. They're also a hisser, so they'll flatten their head out, kind of try to do this puff adder thing, and kind of hiss a little.
Almost like
he
a
has
cobra.
A very cute face.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy's little face
They're adorable.
is so cute. You're right. It's a very turned up. I think my grandmother used to call that a ski slope nose. On a person. I think this guy has a little bit of a ski slope nose.
Yeah.
Super cute.
Yeah, super cute. They're a fun snake. And the name of this snake, I think that the girls are calling it like pork chop or something like that.
Pork chop.
Yeah, I think that
love
was what it
that.
was. Yeah, I have technicians and interns, and yeah, I think they were calling him pork chop. Yeah, so yeah,
He's moving.
mm-hmm.
He's very chill.
Very chill. They're very chill snakes in general. Yeah.
They're extremely popular in the pet trade. And
Mm-hmm.
people breed all sorts of different color morphs, albinos,
His tongue
and
is tickly. You're tickling me with your tongue, pork chop.
Yeah, so like I said, this is a Western, so they're much more common in the pet trade than the Eastern or the Southern. And because the Eastern and Southern are such big toad eaters, I usually feed him like mice, and so the Westerns do a lot better eating mice than the Easterns and Southerns do. So it's just easier to keep, and they look similar enough that I can still use it for outreach, and they're fun and everybody's favorite. So
Gotcha.
Cool.
Cool. I think, are we ready for the last snake?
yes, the last snake.
Can this one stay out with Regan while?
Do you want to hold it? Yeah, totally.
Okay,
yeah,
I don't know.
100%.
If there'd
Well,
be
we'll
like
put the container.
I
leap
don't
out
want to
of-
make them be.
They will not. These snakes will not eat each other, so we don't need to worry.
Cause a snake war.
There will not be a snake war. You can hold him for as long as you want.
Do you want to hold him, Rob?
Maybe I do.
Yep.
Back to my mic.
So this is probably the one that's most likely to poop in the studio. This is the Gulf Salt marsh snake. This is a species actually Pierson studied for his master's, so he is well known. So we talked about identifying characteristics of snakes, and we talked about the rings of the kingsnake, the blotches of the pine snake, the hognose snake, the rat snake, and then lastly we're getting to stripes, right? So this is the striped Gulf Salt marsh snake.
It is the only of the 6 species of water snakes that we have in Florida, the only one that has stripes. And that is an adaptation to the habitat that they're found in. So you can only find these snakes in coastal tidal marshes, especially where you see the open grassy areas, black needle rush, and spartina grasses. And so they hide in those grassy areas during the day, blending in and hoping to avoid being eaten by herons and other birds. And then they come out at night, especially during low tide, and they eat fish in these tidal pools and little tidal rivulets where the fish concentrate. So strict fish eaters. And unless you're out in those habitats, at low tide, you almost never see the snake, despite them being incredibly common.
Gotcha. Low tide at night or just low tide in general?
During the cooler weather, you can find them during the day more, but they are very apprehensive of being in the open where they can be seen by a heron. But occasionally, one will make a bad decision. And so
They're a good one to go out with a headlamp at dark, during low tide. And if you target those tidal pools where the fish are trapped, oftentimes you'll see these guys. And they are hilarious eaters. So Pierson keeps these snakes, and like he said, they all eat fish, and they will. They'll carry around a fish in their mouth, and they kind of have their head elevated. You've never seen a snake look so proud to have caught a fish, and they'll carry it around, and then the other ones will try to steal it from them, and so they're just ridiculous.
They have a lot of
That's
personality.
great.
They have
They
a
really
lot of
they're
personality.
waving their fish around in
It
the air.
seems like they're bragging about it. It honestly
I
does.
love it.
Yeah.
So I was surprised when I was talking to you. A few snakes are fish eaters. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's amazing how specialized some of our native snakes are. So the salt marsh snake eats, small fish in tidal creeks, but we have something called a rainbow snake that's also aquatic that lives in our riverways, and all it eats as an adult are eels, freshwater eels. So it's an extreme specialist. We have a closely related snake to that called the mud snake, which lives in cypress swamps, and it only eats Amphiuma and siren salamanders, which are these big eel-like salamanders. And then we have
fairly nocturnal species as well.
some swamp snakes that specialize on crayfish and dragonfly larvae.
Yeah.
We have rough green snakes, which pretty much only eat invertebrates like spiders and caterpillars and grasshoppers.
It's one of my favorites. Used to be a much more common snake, the rough green snakes, yeah. Used to find those in the forest a lot more commonly than you do now. Yeah. They get run over in the roads a lot.
So this snake, what I'm noticing about it is, like you said, like unlike our other snakes, the stripes are the main point of attraction here. But like not unlike the king snake that had, stripes that kind of went around it. These are like vertical stripes, like down the length of its body, which I think is really interesting. I'm assuming that helps give it good camouflage in those tall grasses that you were saying it lives in. Yeah. Also, it's got a red tongue. These other snakes, like pork chop over here, his tongue is black. But this guy's tongue is red, so just a different distinction he has there, I guess.
I'm not sure that there's a known reason for differences in tongue color. But yeah, this is also the United States' only saltwater adapted snake, which is extremely unusual. We don't have true sea snakes like they do in Asia and Australia, so this is the best we can do. And they don't have any special glands or any sort of physiological ability to tolerate salt. They just kind of avoid it behaviorally, as far as we know. They just know not to drink it. Whereas if you put a freshwater adapted water snake in the same habitats, they would drink the salt water and die pretty quick. And so they're able to recognize salt versus fresh water. But they do, after a heavy rain, they'll drink this lens of fresh water off the surface of the salt marsh. So a lot of special adaptations.
Talk about, these guys are really interesting to me because they will hybridize with our banded water snakes. And that's one of the things Pierson studied, and I think it's pretty interesting.
So, we think of species as being very discrete things, the type A, type B, and they don't blend together. But in the case of the salt marsh snake and the banded water snake, they segregate strongly by habitat, look very different, do different things. But in circumstances where they come together, they'll actually breed and create hybrids. And banded water snakes have obviously encircling bands, whereas these guys have stripes. And so when you merge the two, you get these bizarre-looking hybrid snakes. They're combinations of stripes and blotches. So if you're at St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge down by the lighthouse around those impoundments, you can find hybrids. And Hickory Mountain Wildlife Management Area also has a hybrid population. And so
it's kind of a function of those freshwater impoundments now being so close to the saltwater. So that's kind of a man-made structure that made these species that might not have really ever come together as much kind of come together.
And so we talked about conservation threats for snakes being development, roads, on and on. But and there's a race of salt marsh snake on the Atlantic coast that's almost been hybridized out of existence because of people modifying the coastline with impoundments and mosquito control canals. And so it's hard to find pure populations of them anymore. So.
And it's been, finding like a very pure Gulf salt marsh snake can be something that is getting to be more rare as well, as these hybridations continue to occur, which is kind of sad. Because I think really what they end up doing is functioning more like a banded, like the hybrids function more as a banded water snake than they do as a Gulf salt marsh snake. So it's almost like you could kind of lose that species. What I like about Gulf salt marsh snakes is that they're a Nerodia, so they're water snake, like our banded water snakes. But Nerodia, the fasciata, the banded water snake, they're kind of bitey, and these guys don't really ever bite. So that makes them
they bite less.
They bite less.
Tell me what the word Nerodia means.
It's the scientific name of the water snake. So this
Okay.
is Nerodia
So
clarki.
Nerodia meaning lives in water.
It's the genus.
It's the
And it does
genus.
it does have some allusion to water, living in water. Yeah,
Okay.
I can't remember the exact
Some
etymology.
Latin translation.
Yeah,
that we don't
the
know.
scientific name, that's the genus.
Yes, yeah. So this is Nerodia clarki, and then the banded water snake is Nerodia fasciata.
And this is a full size of this variety of snake?
This is an adult male, and just like the hognose snakes, the females get a good bit bigger, and they tend to be meaner. And
What is cool about these guys? They have live birth.
Oh.
Yeah. So everything else that we showed is egg layers.
Oh, yeah.
And these guys have live birth. So the females actually get pretty big because they're holding all these babies in their belly, right? And typically, if they're a live birth, then usually the females get bigger. Our exception is the diamondback rattlesnake because they have male combat. So when there's male combat, usually the males get bigger. But for everything else, the females are bigger if they have live birth, typically.
Yeah.
And there's always exceptions to the rule, but.
Okay, I have to just be like completely stupid right now. But I thought that like really just mammals do live birth. Right? Like is that not like really unusual for something that's not a mammal to do live birth?
In the reptile world, there's a lot of reptiles that it's not the same mechanism of live birth as mammals. It's ovovivipary, so basically they develop eggs without shells inside of them, and then the eggs hatch inside them before the babies come out.
Okay.
And so when a reptile lays an egg, they just take an extra step by secreting a calcium shell over that and then putting it out in the environment. But here in Florida, all our water snakes, our garter snakes, our rattlesnakes, cottonmouths, copperheads all have live birth.
Wow, that's a completely new piece of information for me.
Yeah, we should have brought them some babies. We have some babies right now of these guys.
It's baby season.
It's baby season, yes.
For my pet water snakes.
Yeah,
so.
and it's a fun species to keep because they're very active and they're very personable, but you have to feed them fish. So our guest bathroom and bathtub often are an aquarium for feeding. And fish are stinky. Yeah, they're stinky. They're stinky going in, and they're very stinky coming out as well. So not a particularly, they're very smelly. They're very smelly. What happens? But they're a cool species.
And
Yeah.
name?
I've got too many to give an individual name, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's right.
Yeah. Viewers, please weigh in.
Yeah.
You can name two different snakes. It's like two different sweepstakes here.
Yeah.
We'll give them a Coast to Canopy sticker if.
Yeah. And I'm
if we select
interested
it.
too, and you were talking about this is the only snake in the U.S. that's adapted to live in salt water. And I think Rob was telling me that. He gave me a little preview of what snakes might come to visit. And I said, well, what about the Burmese python? Doesn't it live in salty water down there in the Everglades area? And Rob said, oh, well, that is not a native snake. So when we're talking about this is the only snake that lives here that's adapted to salt water, we're talking about native snakes.
Right. And, Burmese python, I would say, is tolerant to brackish water rather than having any specific adaptations to be able to, do it better than other snakes. And, Burmese pythons are tolerant enough that they'll actually swim across vast expanses of, salt marsh to get to, offshore islands and stuff like that. But if a Burmese python is only exposed to pure salt water, they will die if given enough time.
Well, and one thing, I'm glad you brought up Burmese pythons because I think this is really important for our viewers to learn about the non-native pentastome, which is R. orientalis. It's the scientific name of that. But that is a species that was probably brought to the U.S. inside in a Burmese python when they were brought to the U.S. And so this is a non-native. It's a pentastome. It is a parasitic crustacean. So it's a small kind of worm. And so what happens is we think it came with the Burmese pythons, and then the Burmese pythons they will poop out the pentastome eggs. So there is a native pentastome. So I'm talking about the non-native one. So they will poop out the eggs of the pentastome. a cockroach will eat that Burmese python poop. Then some intermediate host, usually a frog or a lizard, will eat that cockroach, and the pentastome will hatch out and live inside that intermediate host, not really harm it, but just live inside of it. We're not entirely sure yet what it does to that intermediate host, but then it will, then that lizard or frog gets eaten by a snake. And so then the pentastome will migrate to the lungs of that snake. Now, when we think about a Burmese python, everybody thinks about a big, like 14-foot snake. So the lungs run the length, or lung. I think snakes only have one lung.
One long
One lung. So that runs the length of the snake. And so these crustaceans, these pentastomes can get actually very large because their lungs are large. Now, in our native snakes, much smaller species, they have much smaller lungs, of course. And so what's happening is these pentastomes are actually suffocating these snakes to death, literally to death. And we've lost about 90% of our pygmy rattlesnakes down in the Everglades because of this. Wow. And it is marching north. So we're seeing pentastomes. I found out the other day that there have been picked up in Washington County in Florida. But all the counties, I mean, it's made it all the way to Gainesville, and still even moving north. I think Madison has been one of the counties. And you can if you look up, there's a group called SLAM. I forget what that acronym stands for, but they're studying pentastomes, and we're monitoring for them in the Red Hills region, so this area where Tall Timbers is, and looking for pentastomes. But it's really going to decimate our snake population. We have no way to stop this momentum. We don't know how to control the pentastome, and it's really wiping out snake species. It's been found in multiple species. I don't know how many now, but it's probably a dozen, probably more that we don't know about. But it's going to be a big problem because we're going to see a lot of snakes being wiped out due to this. And one of the things that I know FWC has been working on is trying to tap down some of the movement. So brown and knolls are also an exotic species that live in Florida. And so they can be an intermediate host for this. And brown and knolls are often trapped, and then people ship them in Florida to other areas of the country for feeding snakes usually. And so pentastomes are now they picked some up in Illinois. And so as this kind of explodes, it's going to be a really big issue for snake conservation. And I, as a biologist, am incredibly worried about it. We ended up having a snake. We've been looking at poop, and we've been looking for eggs in the poop. And then you can also open the snake's mouth if you see one hit on the road, and you'll see the pentastomes will start crawling out. So you'll see these like white worms coming out of its mouth. Yeah, it is creepy. And so it's just a really big concern, and it could really decimate our snake populations, which obviously is going to have further food web problems. We're losing rodent control all of a sudden, and all this other, probably unforeseen dramatic effects. So yeah, sad. It's a sad thing.
Diseases and parasites are just this ever-growing list of conservation threats. Another one that's on our radar is called snake fungal disease, which is this ophidiomycosis, which causes lesions and sores, especially on the face and around the eyes of snakes. It can hinder their feeding. It can cause secondary infections. It'll become fatal. It's much worse in some species than others. But more and more people are, if you're out, in any of our natural areas and you see a snake with its face all covered in scabs and crusties, very likely to be snake fungal disease. And so it's just one of those things we're monitoring we don't know what the effects are going to be long term. We don't really have any solutions.
And that's usually, that can be worse up north where they have a longer overwinter period. Mm-hmm. We have picked it up here. Our snakes that we've seen it in, we're testing, we swab, and we send the swabs off for analysis. But they don't look as bad. And oftentimes they can kind of clear that with the shed cycle, which is great because they can shed their skin so they can get rid of that fungus. But in up north, we've seen snakes that are basically blinded by it and obviously not going to survive it.
Yeah. So for this invasive parasite that is, what's the solution? Like, what can people do about that? Is it just fighting the larger invasive species that is the Burmese python and trying to reduce that? I
think the ship has sailed on trying to control the invasive pentastome. without like treating snake populations, if we ever had like some sort of anti-parasitic, but you would have to treat a great deal of snakes. I mean, I worry about all the efforts that's going into the indigo snake release and raising them. And, that's going to get into that population. There's really we don't have a lot of answers right now. We are monitoring where it is. So everybody's kind of, keeping an eye on what counties they're finding it in. But we're seeing a northern movement through Florida. It's not in Georgia yet, but it's right there on the border. I mean, once we pick it up at Tall Timbers, I mean, it's going to be in Georgia. And then, I don't know what we're going to do about that.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time in these situations is you can just only hope that we have robust enough populations that they can adapt and become resilient and just learn to live with the new parasite. So that's one of the downfalls of an increasingly fragmented landscape is that we have very small, fragile populations of even common species left that don't have enough individuals and enough genetic diversity to be able to tolerate these new threats. And so those are the populations you lose first, or kind of isolated small populations. And but yeah, it's kind of a wait and see.
It's definitely,
Penistone.
as someone that works on snakes, it's definitely sad. And, I'm right now in the process of, I hate to say this, but 20 years ago when I was doing my master's and I was working on snakes at Tall Timbers, so we're repeating that same study I did for my master's 20 years later and looking at how the snake community shifted over time. And there's lots to go in on that. But I think those long-term studies are going to be really important when we're seeing, an invasive species that can be very destructive, to look at how the impacts are on all of those species. So it's why long-term research is really important, and getting funding for long-term research is really important, because these will have, the pentostome especially, there will be human impacts because there will be a loss of snake diversity due to it. So it's important.
But it sounds like if there's any kind of hope, it's that we have a lot of conservation land, and so our populations here are maybe more robust than in other parts of Florida where there are a lot of big cities and a lot more roads and subdivisions.
Yeah. That's the hope. Yeah, for sure. We have to find a silver lining somewhere, I suppose. So yeah. But if anybody sees pentostomes, do an online search. You can see ways to report it. We do want to know where it is and how prevalent it is. So there's scientists that are working on this. There's a lot of people that really care. There's scientists that are working on it. So I'm not saying that it's doomsday at all, but I'm saying it's something that is very concerning to a lot of us. And, citizens can help us by reporting it and, caring about snakes and making sure that science and research get funded.
Gotcha. I guess if I should look that up, and we can put a photo up, I guess on the video version and on the blog post, and so people know what it looks like and know if you see this thing, upload it to iNaturalist, or if there are any numbers, we can have that contact information in there.
Yeah, let's do that.
For sure.
Citizen scientists, I think, are such an important part of helping to help professional scientists track some of these things and keep our native species, our native wildlife, plants and animals going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I want to thank you guys so much for coming in. This was such a fun discussion up until the end there, but even then, that's important to know. But I just really appreciate you guys coming in. Kim, Pierson, Regan, thanks for it. And also Pork Chop and Pirate and what was it?
Ray.
Yes. And
our
two unnamed guests.
No names who, again, listeners, let us know your thoughts.
Yes, leave your name suggestions in the comments. Thanks for joining our snake party today on Costa Canopy. You can continue the party over on the WFSU Ecology blog with the illustrated version of this podcast, the video version, and other stories and videos about indigo snakes, eastern diamondback rattlesnakes, and tons on the habitats where we might find them. All of this work is made possible by viewers and listeners like you. We want to recognize our supporters, so we're trying a new thing. It's the Costa Canopy Seed Circle, which you can join for a $10 a month pledge to WFSU Public Media. Join the Seed Circle and we'll shout you out for a year on this podcast. Thank you to our inaugural members, Alina Pryor, Chris McFarland, and Clara Mullins. Once again, you can hop over to wfsu.org/ecologyblog for more information. This has been Coast to Canopy, an ecology podcast from WFSU Public Media. Today we had Taylor Cox running audio, Jason Acuna handled video, and Ian McGordy digital video post-production. My co-host was Regan McCarthy, and I'm Rob Diaz de Villegas.